Hey folks, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another one of our weekly Haikyu to the Top discussion videos, and today we are here to talk all about episode 5, Hunger. But before we get into things proper, I do, as always, have to give a big thank you to those of you who shared last week's video over on Twitter. At Paemon, at Clockwork Hams, at Deep Not That Deep, and at FireOtaku845. Thanks so much for sharing last week's video, everybody, and if you too would like to have your name shouted out in next week's Haikyu video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet, and then tag me at JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's video. Okay, so getting into this week's episode, we gotta talk about 3 things in particular. We gotta talk about Hinata continuing to be the best ball boy in all the lands. We gotta talk about Kageyama's time of discovery, and we have to talk about both camps coming to a close. So let's go ahead and start with Hinata first, since Hinata's the first character, or the first of the 2 characters that we see in this week's episode, since this whole journey has, it's been about several characters, but at the end of the day, it's about 2 characters specifically, Hinata and Kageyama, which is basically the story of Haikyu in a nutshell, but still. We gotta start with Hinata. So Hinata, he's continuing to sharpen that clever mind of his, because he's always been like the hyper boy, you know. He's always been all about just getting to where the ball is going. He never actually paid attention to anything else going on around him, and we've seen him slowly hone that skill, slowly get those sharper eyes to really observe the court beyond what the ball is doing, to see what the players themselves are doing, who is where, who's doing what. Hinata can read the full court now, and he's actually gotten to a point where he's able to observe 4 stellar players playing a 2v2 practice match, and he's able to actually predict what the players are going to do based on not only how they play, but where the ball is in play. So Hinata's basically just improved what he's already had. Hinata was already super energetic, followed the ball like a hawk. You know, he was on that. Basically, Hinata's becoming Ushijima. He's got the eyes of a hawk. The dude's just all over the friggin' map now. Because before, that hyperness could take him to the ball, but he was never really sure what to do with the ball. He was like a dog chasing cars. He never knew what he was gonna do if he caught the car. He just was gonna do things. I don't know why I just quoted Dark Knight, but regardless, that's kind of who Hinata's been, you know. He's just been like the dude who goes to the ball and hits it really hard. But now he's actually able to hone those skills. We've seen him slowly improve his ability to not only be where the ball is going to be, but also practice that proper technique. We see him doing the same thing in this episode, mirroring his fellow volleyball players. We actually see him basically shadowing Ushijima at one point, doing the same steps as him to try to get into that same rhythm, to try to get into Ushijima's head. And we actually see Hinata even go so far as to hound Ushijima for advice during the practice match where the rest of Shiratorizawa arrives to kind of hang out with them since their coach got food poisoning from the oysters they ate last week. He's not injured or anything, it's just he's at home sick, so it meant that Shiratorizawa had no one to practice with, so they decided they were going to practice with the first years who are in this training camp. And we see Hinata basically just rush straight to Ushiwaka as soon as he can, and he just immediately asks the dude for advice. And the fact that Hinata is willing to go out of his way to ask for help, right? He's not so much asking for help as much as he is asking, what were you thinking when you were spiking? What was going through your head? What would you do if it didn't work out and you had to bounce back to the court? What would you do? Basically just asking Ushijima, who is an amazing resource to have. The dude is insanely talented, so to ask him questions is huge. And Hinata's not afraid to do that. And we see that even characters like Goshiki, who is not only on the same team as Ushijima, but is in the same position as Hinata, who should be asking him questions. He's like, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't ask questions to my rival. And the rest of the team's like, boy, what the hell are you talking about? Boy, go ask the man some questions, for crying out loud. Because Hinata's jumping ahead of you. And that's the thing, right? Because I was like, ooh, are you gonna disturb my new ship? You better not. They don't, and it actually leads to a really funny moment where both Goshiki and Hinata are excitedly asking Ushijima for advice. I wish we saw more of Ushijima in this arc. I honestly, because he's in the OP and he's so prominent in the opening, I kind of expected to get more Ushijima in this arc. We don't get as much of him as at least I would have liked. He does set Hinata on the correct path to observing more than just being the ball boy. He's actually like set him on that course to watch the court. You know, he gave him that push that he needed in the right direction. But I feel like I wanted a little bit more from him, because, I don't know, I'm a little worried that we might not see him again, because he's basically a third year, so he can't even really do much beyond practice. I mean, unless we're going to get a university arc, which I doubt, but yeah, I don't know, I just feel like we won't see him again. That kind of bums me out. There is one more thing about the first year camp that I'll get to that also sort of bums me out, but I also sort of liked it. We'll get there once we talk about the camps coming to a close. But before we do, I also wanted to talk a little bit about Kageyama's camp. I said that Kageyama had a time of discovery, and that's a direct quote from the man's coach, who is the All-Japan coach, right? So Kageyama is blessed with this seriously solid coach. I can't remember his name. They never mentioned it during the episode, and I feel a little bit bad that I can't give this man his due because I was so impressed with this guy. Washijo and Ukai and all of them are great coaches. This is not a knock against them. They are all great in different ways, but the All Japan coach actually being smart enough to be like, okay, so I'm going to shake up the positions just to see how well-rounded these players are, but also to see if maybe I can draw something out of them, find some new potential in areas they maybe didn't even know that they were excelling at. And I really want them to love this game. I want them to love volleyball. And that's so simple, like that's such a simple concept, but like at the same time, we don't really hear a lot of the other coaches say stuff like that. Ukai is the closest one I can think of where he's just like, I want you guys to love this game. Washijo is about like turning it military, you know, like you are going to be great at this game. Whereas the All Japan coach is like, you are going to be great, and I'm going to draw out that potential from you. I'm going to get you to a point where you could play any position, but at the same time, you're going to want to play any position because you're going to want to be on that court no matter what, because you are going to love this game. And that had me hyped, because again, I'm sure I've said this in previous videos, I'm not a big volleyball guy. I don't really enjoy playing any sports, to be fair, but volleyball was, I played volleyball in grade school, but that was about it. I had no connection to volleyball leading into Haikyu, but Haikyu makes me such a fan. It does what every good sports anime should do, and it gets me like wanting to go out and actually play the damn sport. And this coach seems like the kind of dude who would want that. Like, this coach is almost like the embodiment of Haikyu, where he just wants you to love this game. And Kageyama had such a great resource in that coach. I would have loved to have seen more interaction between the coach and Kageyama, and even just Kageyama and some of the other players. Because the other players, like, they were kind of teasing him last week, and I saw some people being like, oh, I don't know what JoJo meant by teasing. They were teasing him. Teasing doesn't mean insulting. There are two different things. Teasing means, like, playful jabs. I don't know why people were like, JoJo doesn't know what teasing means. It's like, no, they were clearly, like, they were literally teasing him. They were jokingly calling him names and jabbing at him. Not to make him feel bad, but just because that's what you do when you're a group of sportsmen, when you're just even a group of friends, or just a group of people getting together to do a thing. You're gonna, especially like a competitive sport, like you're gonna be jabbing at each other. So that's what I meant by teasing. I don't know why that was such an issue from last week. The comments, that's part of the reason why I barely read the comments anymore. Just the miscommunication's mind-blowing. I don't know why I went on that side tangent, but it had to be said, I guess. I wanted more time with Kageyama and the other players. In particular, I really wanted to see more of Kageyama and the other setter, Atsumu, I believe his name was Atsumu, Miya Atsumu. They call him Mia in this episode, so I was like, oh, I called him something else in the video, whoops. But yeah, I wanted more from that character, because he struck me as really interesting. When he called Kageyama a goody two-shoes, I was like, what the hell? Like, what? And he says, like, well, I meant that because you're honest, and you're, like, hardworking, and you're a nice young man. But at the same time, like, you said that to dig at him. And you could tell it was said that way, because he does like the look up with the smirk. Like, that was like, he may as well be evil in that moment. He may as well have been Dio. So I'm trying to think, like, why would he say it like that? So when he says, like, you're a hardworking, honest young dude, I was like, oh, okay, that's not the vibe that you were giving, but okay. I feel like he sees something in Kageyama that he likes. There's something about Kageyama that he's like, I can't tell if it's a I want to nurture this kid, or if it's I want to crush this kid. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to see more of those two, and I feel like we're gonna see a lot, because I have a feeling they're gonna go toe to toe in the Tokyo tournament. But this leads us nicely into talk about both camps coming to a close, and one of the things that I really want to point out about not just both camps but also this arc in general is the whole take your time thing. The All Japan coach brings this up, and last week we had an entire episode called Take Your Time, and I feel like that was the whole purpose of this like training arc. It's not really an arc, because it's like the whole season seems to have the same vibe of just take your time. Haikyu Season 3 was insanely hype. It's one of the best seasons of anything I've ever seen, ever. And I'm not saying that lightly, I genuinely mean that. So going into the season, I was so confused as to how they were going to top that. And the way that they were going to top that is by taking their time. And I feel like that's not only a tribute to the show, but that's also in honor of the creator. Furudate knew that after the Shiro Torizawa versus Karasuno match, they had to take their time. And like to bring us back down, to calm everybody down, and then work their way back up to that same level of hype. I've seen some people say that this arc or this season is slow, and I think that that's missing the point. I think it's supposed to be slow. It's supposed to be this like rebuilding of the team. It feels like Karasuno's not so much starting from square one again, but realizing how much higher they can go. And it's one of the things that Kageyama even says to Hinata when they reunite. You can fly even higher. And I feel like that's the whole purpose of this whole like camp, like the training camps, and this upcoming rematch with Date Tech. This idea that you can fly so much higher, and it's important to take your time doing so. Not just observing the courts, not just take your time in terms of volleyball, but just to breathe it all in again. Like calm yourself down so that you can reach those heights once again. And the last thing I'm going to mention before I wrap up this video is, while Goshiki and Hinata is still my ship, I love it to pieces, seeing Kageyama and Hinata reunite was like, yeah, I remember why I shipped this. Because like, I think it was just that I needed them to be nice. They're constantly screaming at each other, so I was like, can you guys just, is it possible for you two to even be nice? That's all I would want, is for you two to be nice, and I could ship it again, and then they're nice to each other at the end of this episode. So I'm like, damn it, I ship it again. Anyway, with that said, I'd say that this episode is like a warm cup of chamomile tea. It's a very soothing episode, very healing episode. It's not very hype. There's not so much a lot of hype stuff. There's some cool moments, a lot of big spikes and stuff like that, but this much like many of the previous episodes have been about sort of calming down and taking your time and focusing, and nothing calms the nerves quite like chamomile tea. So I feel like a chamomile tea is an appropriate comparison for this episode. And with that said, that is a wrap on today's video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, then go ahead and hit that like button, maybe even consider sharing the video around on the internet, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to stick around and see more content from me. And if you do, be sure to click on that bell icon so that you'll know immediately when a new video of mine comes out. And if you want to go above and beyond, then consider checking out our Teespring store and grabbing yourself a mug, or checking out our Patreon page, which really helps support the channel. And speaking of our Patreon page, I want to give a big thank you to those of you who support the channel over on Patreon. Andrew W., Calvin A., Crowbar of Irony, Daniel G., Digger the Fox, Emily, Ionos, Urza, Ginkotaku, Godzilla Fan, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Marshall B., Mirth Mouser, Cell, Shadow Creative, Stephen G., Sakochi, Tristan G., and Veridin. A huge thank you to all of you who support this channel over on Patreon, and if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then be sure to check out the link in the description to check out our Patreon page and get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord for as little as $1 a month. And with all that said, I want to once again thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.